At 30 years old, I figured I'd outgrown the childish fear of being home alone. Our house is split into 2 apartments. My sister lives downstairs, I live upstairs. She spends most nights at her boyfriend's place 20 miles away, so I'm used to having the place to myself. This particular night, I was sprawled on my couch watching a horror movie in the dark. My upstairs apartment has an open floor plan, so the living room flows into the dining room and kitchen. Sitting on that couch meant having my back to most of the room, which isn't exactly ideal when you're watching something scary. I'll admit, I kept glancing over my shoulder like some paranoid teenager. After the movie ended, I brushed my teeth, killed all the lights, and went to bed. Sleep found me easily enough, but it didn't last long. Around 1 a.m., something jolted me awake. At first, I couldn't figure out what had disturbed my sleep. Then I heard it, a voice drifting up from downstairs. It sounded exactly like my sister calling out. She seemed to be inside the house, not outside asking to be let in. Still groggy and confused, I assumed she'd come home and was either calling for me or having some kind of argument with her boyfriend. I stumbled out of bed and flicked on the hallway light. The voice came again, clearer this time. Definitely my sister saying my name. I made my way through my living room and called back down to her, asking what she needed. The downstairs was pitch black. I fumbled around the foyer looking for a light switch, my mind still fuzzy with sleep. When I finally found the kitchen light and flipped it on, the fluorescent bulb took its sweet time brightening up the space. Nobody was there. I checked her bedroom, thinking maybe she was changing clothes or something. Empty. I called her name loudly, and silence answered back. But then, just seconds after my voice echoed through the apartment, something crashed to the floor in her bedroom. The same bedroom I'd just confirmed was vacant. I bolted upstairs like a scared child and grabbed my phone. 3 calls to my sister went straight to voicemail. I locked myself in my room, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Morning brought a text from her asking why I'd called so late. When I asked if she'd been home, she confirmed she was still at her boyfriend's place. I went back to her bedroom to investigate that mysterious crash, but found nothing on the floor that could have made such a noise. I want to believe I hallucinated everything that night. The alternative is too terrifying to consider, but I've never had sleep disorders or hallucinations before, and what I heard was so vivid, so real. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I'd gone into that bedroom after hearing that crash. Growing up with a single mum who worked brutal nursing shifts meant I spent a lot of nights alone. My older brother had left for college, so it was just me holding down the fort most evenings. This was a weekend night, and I'd had my sort of girlfriend Molly over to watch movies. Her parents were strict about curfews, so she had to leave before it got too late. I was 14 and alone in a 2-story house that backed up to dense woods. After she left, I went up to my room and settled into bed to watch more TV. That's when I heard it, the distinct sound of one of our deck chairs being dragged across the wooden planks outside. My bedroom window looked right down onto that deck. I got up and peered outside, thinking maybe Molly had come back for something she'd forgotten. Someone was definitely sitting in one of our chairs, but when they looked up at me, I realized it wasn't Molly at all. I jerked away from the window, heart hammering. The person down there was a complete stranger, at least not anyone I could recognize in the darkness. I quickly texted our friend group chat, asking if anyone was messing with me. The few who responded said no and wanted to know what I was talking about. Curiosity got the better of my fear. I crept back to the window and looked down again. The stranger was still there, still sitting in our chair, still staring up at my window. He was definitely a man, and he'd definitely seen me both times. I switched off my TV and sat on my bed in complete darkness, knees pulled up to my chest. I didn't dare turn on my phone screen, afraid he'd see the light. I kept my window open, but tried not to move, hoping he'd think I'd left the room. 5 long minutes passed before I worked up the courage to look again. My heart sank when I saw he hadn't moved an inch, still sitting there, still watching my window. This time, instead of hiding, I tried to be brave. "What do you want?" I called down to him. His shoulders started bouncing up and down like he was laughing hysterically, but no sound came at first. Then I heard it, a slight whistling noise, like he was laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. When I asked him to please leave, he just kept making that horrible wheezing sound. I retreated to my bed again, too scared to call the police for reasons I still can't explain. Then I heard him testing our back door, pushing against it, trying to get inside. I ran to the top of the stairs and listened. Now he was at the front door, jiggling the handle, pushing against the frame. Thank God our doors were locked, or I might not be here to tell this story. I was a skinny 14-year-old who couldn't fight off a determined adult. I stayed locked in my room until my mum came home around 9 the next morning. When I told her what happened, she was furious that I hadn't called 911. Looking back, that was probably one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made. But when you're 14 and terrified, logic doesn't always win. This is the story of how I almost died as a 10-year-old, left home alone on what became the most intense night of my childhood. We're a family of 5. I was 10, my older brother was 14, and my little sister was 5. It was a Friday night when everything went wrong. My brother was out causing trouble with his friends, something we discovered when the dreaded phone call came. I was in my room playing a Star Wars video game when I heard my mum start crying and screaming. Terrified, I ran to see what was happening. She was on the phone with the hospital. My brother had been hit by a car. The next few minutes were chaos. My parents grabbed their coats and my little sister, then asked if I'd be okay staying home alone. I said yes, not wanting to see my brother hurt in some hospital bed. They rushed out, leaving me by myself on a Friday night. I went back to my video game, trying not to worry too much. My dad had seemed calm while comforting my mum, so I figured everything would be fine. I played for a couple more hours until I heard the front door open. It was well past midnight by then, way past my bedtime. I turned off my TV and PlayStation and crawled into bed with my Game Boy, listening for my parents' voices. Maybe they'd brought my brother home, or at least had good news to share. But I didn't hear anything. No conversation, no footsteps coming upstairs. After several minutes of silence, something felt wrong. I crept to my door and opened it quietly, then made my way to the banister that overlooks our living room. The lights were off downstairs, but I could make out 3 tall figures standing in the darkness. They weren't my family. Terror froze me in place for a moment before I managed to back into my room and shut the door as quietly as possible. But it wasn't quiet enough. I knew they'd heard that soft click. I rushed to my closet and slipped inside, burying myself behind boxes and bags of clothes. From where I crouched, I was pretty well hidden from view. The waiting felt eternal. Then my bedroom door opened, and I knew I was going to die. Footsteps entered my room. Maybe one person, maybe 2. I heard them move toward my bed and rustle through my covers. Then silence. More footsteps, this time toward the closet. The closet door opened. I held my breath and didn't move a muscle. The door stayed open for what felt like 20 seconds of absolute silence. I never looked up, never shifted position. Finally, the door closed. Footsteps retreated from my room. An hour later, I heard my parents return. I ran downstairs to find them, discovering that our front door was ajar and several valuables were missing. In their panicked rush to get to the hospital, they'd forgotten to lock up. It was a night that went from bad to worse for our family. I was lucky not to be killed or kidnapped. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if the person who opened my closet door actually saw me crouched there behind those bags. Maybe they were just burglars who didn't want to hurt a kid. Or maybe I came within seconds of something much worse. I was 17 and home alone for an entire week, a rare occurrence since my parents barely ever traveled. My mum's wealthy friend Jenny had invited them on a trip she was paying for, and since I'm an only child, I had the house to myself. We lived in Newark, Ohio, on a quiet road where maybe 3 cars passed per day. Our backyard bordered a thick stretch of woods, and we had a large deck overlooking the trees. It was July 2013, and I was out on that deck on a Thursday night, smoking weed with my speaker playing music. That's when I first heard it. A voice calling from the woods. I lowered my music and listened, but it didn't repeat. When I turned the volume back up, I heard it again, clearer this time. I shut the music off completely and waited. Sure enough, a male voice called out from the tree line. "Hey, over here." The woods were maybe 20 to 30 yards from our deck, and that's where the sound was coming from. At first, I figured it was just some kids playing around out there. But then the voice called again. "Hey, over here, we need help." This time I realized the voice was too deep to belong to a kid, and when someone yells for help, it's always at least a little concerning. I was starting to feel uncomfortable, wondering if these calls were directed at me. The voice came again, "Straight in front of you. Please come help us." Now I knew for sure they were talking to me. Reluctantly, I called back, "Who is that?" "We just need help," came the reply. "We're stuck in the woods." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Just please come help. Straight in front of you. Here's where being high probably saved my life, but also nearly got me killed." The weed had me in this relaxed, almost carefree headspace where helping someone seemed like the obviously right thing to do. I wasn't thinking about danger or red flags. I was just thinking that someone needed help, and I was the only person around to provide it. In my altered state, the whole situation felt less threatening and more like a simple good deed. Plus, I figured if it was really dangerous, they wouldn't be asking for help so politely, right? That's stoner logic for you. I got up from my chair and walked down the deck steps onto the grass, heading toward the woods. "I'm coming. Where are you?" The voice responded immediately, "Right in front of you. I see you." Something about that chilled me. "Wait, are you alone or with someone?" Silence. I stopped halfway to the woods, a bad feeling settling in my gut. I started backing toward the house, not wanting to turn my back on whatever was out there. It had taken me too long to realize how suspicious this whole situation was. I made it back to the deck, and the voice stayed quiet. If this was real, if they truly saw me walking away, wouldn't they have called out asking where I was going? They knew I was onto them. I went inside and locked all the doors. I was still high, which probably explained why I'd been so trusting at first. The weed had made me relaxed and gullible. Then I heard the voice again, much closer this time. Definitely in my backyard now, not the woods. There was splashing water, either from our pool or the small pond we had. I hurried to the window and peered out. At first, I didn't see anyone, but then the voice called out, "I see you," followed by laughter. I spotted him, at least one guy that I could see. He was hiding behind our above-ground pool, and I could only make out his head and dark, medium-length hair. It was too dark to see much else. I closed the blinds, hoping he'd lose interest if I stopped entertaining him. He was probably some sick person who enjoyed terrorizing others, and I didn't want to give him what he wanted. But then came horrible, aggressive banging on the window where I just closed the blinds. On the other side, he was screaming, "Help! Help!" I screamed back at the top of my lungs, "Get the hell away, you freak! The police are coming!" I kept yelling it, trying to sound crazier than him. His laughter started fading as he walked away. I collapsed on my couch, trembling and out of breath. After sitting there for a while, it seemed like he'd really given up and left. I still managed to get a good night's sleep. Weed helps with that, but I often wonder how differently I would have handled the situation if I hadn't been high. Would I have been more cautious from the start, or would I have been too paranoid to function? The experience definitely made me more careful about who I opened my door to. I'm 23 and still live with my parents. One afternoon when they were both out, I was shooting hoops in our front yard. During a break between shots, I glanced up at one of our upstairs windows and saw a woman standing there. It wasn't my mum. It wasn't my sister. It was a complete stranger. When she noticed me looking at her, she quickly ducked away from the window. I dropped my basketball and ran inside to investigate. I started upstairs and checked every room. Bedrooms, bathrooms, closets, nothing. Then I searched the main floor, living room, kitchen, dining room, another bedroom, more closets. Still nothing. Finally, I checked our small basement. It's not a big space. Just a couple of couches, a bar, and 2 closets. Not many places for someone to hide. When I opened the second closet door, my heart was pounding. This was the last unchecked spot I could think of. I yanked the door open like ripping off a Band-Aid and immediately pushed myself into the closet, ready to confront whoever might be hiding there. But all I found were coats and hangers. I was completely confused. I definitely saw that woman. It wasn't the kind of thing you just vividly imagine. I went back upstairs and screamed as loud as I could for whoever was in the house to get out. I yelled so loud that our neighbor came over to check if I was okay. I told him about seeing the woman at our window, and he helped me search the house again. When we came up empty-handed, I figured she must have escaped through the back door, which I had unlocked when I went to grab my basketball. After my neighbor left, I called my parents and told them the story. They weren't thrilled, but asked me to check if anything was stolen. Fortunately, everything valuable seemed to be in place. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. My mind was racing. Most people can't relate to seeing a stranger inside their house, watching them from their own window. But my restlessness ended up saving me. I was finally starting to drift off when I heard sounds from the other side of my bed. I had a fan running, so the room wasn't completely silent, which is why I didn't immediately investigate the first noise. But the sounds became more human-like. I turned to my other side, and there she was, climbing out from under my bed. She stood up tall next to the mattress, and I screamed louder than I'd ever screamed in my life. I jumped out of bed and tackled her to the floor, getting my hand around her throat and demanding to know who she was. She was tall, dirty-looking, and fought like a wild animal. My doorbell rang, my neighbor again. I dragged the struggling woman to the front door while she clawed at me. I still have 2 scars on my right arm from her nails. My neighbor helped me restrain her while we waited for the police. The whole time, she was screaming and cursing at us, making threats. She looked and acted like someone suffering from serious drug withdrawal. When the police arrived, one of the officers immediately recognized her. They'd dealt with her multiple times before. Her name was Karen, which felt almost too perfect. Watching her get loaded into the back of that police car was incredibly satisfying. I thanked my neighbor for coming to help so quickly, then spent the rest of the night with my mind racing again. But this time, instead of being completely freaked out, I felt this overwhelming sense of satisfaction. I can't fully explain why, but there was something deeply gratifying about catching the person who'd been violating my family's space and privacy. Justice had been served, and Karen was finally going where she belonged.